Hey everybody, in this video, I'm going to show you a new way that we can filter using slicers. So slicers are only, will not work in data ranges, they will work in the tables though. So this is something that we can use with tables, which again is a pro for tables, right? So there's pros and cons to each style. But the slicers are pretty interesting in helping to make the table more dynamic and a different way that we can filter. Now, obviously, you can filter again using the tabs that we've already done here, right? So you have other ways that you can filter. This is just another technique. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to click cell A4 just to kind of click the start of my table. And then I'm going to go up to insert and I'm going to click slicer. I'm just going to move this around. So I'm going to click the slicer feature. And then you can click which parts you want to add that feature. So you could do everything, but it gets a little bit, you'll see, it gets a little bit busy if you do too many. So this is a good technique if there's a particular couple columns that you really want to look at filtering. So your book wants us to look at department, higher year, and office. And I'm going to click OK, and you'll see what will come up. So these are what the slicers look like. And they allow you to turn things on and off. So for instance, if I look at the office one, if I just select Chicago, you can see that only the Chicago data is there. Or if I select Denver, it's just showing me the Denver data. If you want to select more than one, you have to click this button first, which allows you to select more than one option. Or you can even select all of them. And then you can also clear your filters by pressing this little X and it will revert back. And again, you're not deleting the information, you're just filtering it. So the only problem is like, well, where do you put these things, right? They're pretty cumbersome looking. So what our workbook has is a worksheet called dashboard. So we're going to stick all the slicers on the dashboard worksheet and they'll still work on this worksheet. So one by one, I'm just going to click it. I'm going to cut them. So I'm going to go home. I'm going to cut the office one. I'm going to go to my dashboard here. And I'm going to paste it. And I'm just going to spread it out and use cells B through C. And I think your book wants it to go to row 9. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the other ones. So again, I'm going to take my higher year. I'm going to go ahead and cut this. And I'm just going to go ahead and put it on my dashboard and just kind of paste them one under the next. Oops. And just kind of resize them and organize them a little bit so they don't take up too much room. Let's make this one a little smaller. But again, you can just kind of play around. And then the last one here too, I'm going to select it. I'm going to cut it and I'm going to put it on my dashboard. I'm just going to put it right over here and paste. And again, I'll just do a little bit of tweaking. So I have those all in one space and they still work from over here. So if you go to your employee page, right, I don't really have anything filtered yet, but if I go back to my dashboard and I filter, maybe I just want to have Chicago and higher year 2018 and we'll leave all departments. If I go back, you can see that it filtered it, right? So they'll work on the other worksheet, which is really nice. But it is a little bit of back and forth in that case. And again, you can clear out your filters if you want to by go ahead and clearing there. All right, we can also change the number of columns that we have. So if you select one of your slicers and you go to the slicer feature up top, it defaults to 1 column, but you could make it 2 columns or even 3 columns if you need to. So then that way you are viewing, the information in one area. So you don't have to constantly scroll through those slicers. Department, let's see, maybe we can do 3 columns there, 4 columns, or maybe a little bit much for me to read, but I can maybe make this a little bit bigger for myself. So again, you do what works for you to keep them organized. And you can also manually type in how big you would like them, heights and widths and things like that as well. So again, you can play around and then that way it's a little bit easier to select, I would like to select multiple. So maybe I want Chicago, Dallas, or let's unselect everything first. So maybe I would like to just have Boston, Chicago, and Denver selected, right? So we can go back to our employee page and make sure that that filtering is happening. You can scroll through and double check here. And again, when they're purple, they are selected. So if I want to select a couple different years, maybe, you know, the first, I don't know, 5 years, let's say for the higher years, or maybe I only want to select, you know, some of my categories, I can go through and again, just play around and it will filter it appropriately on the page before. So again, just another way to filter, and the slicers are pretty interesting here. All right, so creating that dashboard is helpful if you're going to use slicers. Again, they're pretty large, so you don't really want them on top of your data. It also makes it really hard to then select your data because they get in the way. So it is a good idea to try to create a dashboard here. All right, so let's do a couple little things here. I'm gonna just clear all my filters for right now and start over here. And you can see that this worksheet has a couple little categories already filled in for some work that we're going to do. So we're going to use the count feature to count the number of employees that we have. So I'm clearing all my filters for a second, and I'm just going to come here. It's kind of already set up for me. And the count feature, remember, we can use count, or count A allows us to count if it's not numbers as well. So count A is just cells that are not empty, so it allows us to count text. So I'm going to use that feature. And then I can go and select it, or I can type in my table name. So I can just write employee, oops, let's try that again, employee table. So that's my table name on the other page. And then I'm going to count the ID column. So this is one way that you can type in a formula rather than going to the next page and selecting it. You can type in your formula. So you would type in the table name, and then again, we use those brackets to designate those columns and hit enter, and it will tell you how many employees there are. And that does match. If you scroll through and you subtract manually, you do get, you know, 529 employees here. I'm using a slightly edited version compared to the one in the book. I think the book has 530, but I've been playing around. So that's why my number is a little bit off, in case you're concerned that there's something wrong there. So that's just one way to do it. Now, notice if I start applying filters, you know, so let's apply some filters here. And maybe we're just going to select, you know, 3 years. You'll notice that even though my employee page has now changed, my function here has not. So when I do a regular function using the table, it will not change compared to the filters, because again, the filters are not deleting anything, they're just hiding it. If you want your functions to change using the filters, then there's a way to do it. And this is what makes the slicers pretty cool and allows you to have more of a dynamic table. So to do that, I'm going to show you what you would do next. So you have to actually use the subtotal feature instead. So this is kind of like a little trick here. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm just going to actually write this down. So remember, it was 529, just so we can kind of compare. And I'm going to start over. I still want to count it, but I want it to work with, actually, let's take my filters off for a second. I want it to work with my filters. So what you do is you start with the equal sign and you start with subtotal, and you're going to double click subtotal. And you're going to see here, because we're using tables, it's going to now let you select a function that you want to use. And again, it's giving you the most common functions that we tend to use here. So I'm still going to use the count A function. They use a function number reference here, but it still is count A. They just don't write the whole word in. And if you look at your text, they do have some of the more common number references, just in case you would rather use the numbers instead. But they're not wrong. So I have that. And then what I'm going to do is now I'm going to enter where I want my information to come from. So I'm going to put a comma in. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and type. So I'm going to type my table. You can see it's popping up there. So there's my table that I'm going to use. And I'm going to, again, use the ID column. So that bracket allows me to select those columns there. And then I hit enter and it says 529. But now as I change my filters, you can see that it adjusts. So as I'm, selecting different filters and things, it adjusts accordingly. So I think that is pretty cool. I don't know if you ask me. So just keep in mind that you may want both pieces of information, right? So you may want to have part of your worksheet set up to have, full table data information, right, with everything. Obviously, because those employees are not going away, right? They're still there. But the slicing feature is really nice because if you want to have that summary information for particular groups, you don't have to recalculate it over and over again. You can just use the slicer tools and select which parts that you want to look at, and it will update appropriately. And that works also with other formulas. So again, it's subtotal is what you have to use here. And then let's say we wanted to find, let's see, your book would also like to do a different formula. So let's do number 1 for the average. Oh, good. Oh, we'll do total here. So total wages. So we'll do the sum for total, comma. Again, I start typing in my table and hopefully it comes up. You can double click it. And then I'm going, oops, oh no, I didn't finish here. And I'm going to go ahead here and use my wages column. So I use my brackets there, and then I can go ahead and hit enter, and that is the total wages. And again, this will change as you change your slicers and select different parts of it, which is really cool, I think, that it makes it more dynamic there. And again, I'll let you fill in the rest of them. I'm not going to fill all of them in. So other things we can do is we can also create charts and make those charts dynamic as well using the slicer features. So let me quickly do that with you. I'm going to go back to the employee data for a second here. And I'm going to select cell M5. So I'm going to focus on wages. So I'm going to select the first cell. And again, you can select it and just highlight the whole thing. Or as a little shortcut here, if you click Control and then the space bar, it will select the rest of that data for you. So that was Control space bar as a little, I don't know, quick tip. But you can just drag and select as well. So let's say I would like to enter a graph or a histogram on my wages data. So I'm going to go up here to Insert. I'm going to go to Recommended Charts, and I'm going to go ahead and select the histogram. So a histogram is just a bar chart or a column chart where everything is touching. So the bars are touching. If you take stats, we do it a little bit more precisely than what Excel does here. So we're going to do a little bit of editing. But if you meet a statistician, then we're going to be probably a little bit more exact in class than what I'll show you now. But it's a good intro. So I'm going to hit OK. Again, I do not want this chart right here. So I'm going to go to Home. I'm going to cut this chart. I'm going to put it on my dashboard. I'm going to stick it right here. I know that's not the best spot, but I'm just going to stick it in right there for us to work with for right now. And again, you can go in here and we can edit some features as well. So if I click that plus feature, for right now, I'm going to get rid of the title and the grid lines. You can put in data labels, which I really like. In this case, it shows you how many are in each group here. And of course, you can do some more editing. So if I click the horizontal axis, I can go ahead and edit. You can see Excel automatically creates these bins or these ranges of values that they put them in, but you can change that. So for instance, maybe you want your bin widths to be by 10,000. So meaning that each range of values is for 10,000. You can even submit the number of bins that you want. So basically, again, the number of kind of ranges, different groups. It's nice to have an overflow bin. So our overflow value here is going to be 100,000, meaning anything that's over 100,000 will go into one column, and then an underflow bin as well. So underflow is anything less than 40,000. I just hit enter, and you can kind of see how this is now updating. So anything less than 40,000 for the wages is going to go into one column. Anything greater than 100,000 will go into the final column. And then the rest of them are all 10,000 ranges, $10,000 ranges, which is what I put in here for bandwidth. You can also edit. Again, don't forget, you can shrink your numbers here so you can see them a little bit better as well. And you will notice that one side has a bracket and one side has a parenthesis. Parenthesis means that that data point is not included and a bracket is included. So for instance, for 60 to 70,000 here, it goes up to 70,000, including 70,000. But if you make exactly 60,000, you're included in the column before. So the parenthesis here would be like you're over 60,000, $60,001. So that's what the difference is there. A parenthesis is like a less than or greater than, whereas a bracket is like a less than or equal to, or a greater than or equal to. Again, if you take stats, then we are a little bit more precise with these groups. We don't usually use the parenthesis bracket idea, but if you get there, we'll see you there. We'll talk more, but this is just a nice quick graph that we can use. And the great thing here as well is that because we're using slicers, they become dynamic. So that histogram will change depending on, whichever categories that you're selecting. Or if I want to just select, just administration, I can see that, most people make over $100,000 in just administration. Or if I want to look at finance, I can look at just people who are in finance. Or maybe I only want to look at people who are in finance who started in the year 2020. So again, without being a total nerd here, slicers can be pretty cool in allowing you to create some dynamic formulas and some dynamic graphs so that you're not redoing them constantly. Again, you want to still have all your data. So I still recommend having like a summary sheet somewhere for the full table of data, right? Or whatever you're focusing on. So you want to make sure you do have that original data somewhere for it to view. But this slicer feature is really nice if you want to kind of look for patterns or just pick up particular groups, for instance. All right, so the last thing I want to show you guys too here, I'm just going to kind of move this table out of the way because we don't really need it anymore. So you guys can kind of, again, just kind of keep playing around there. With our tables and tools here, is that VLOOKUP still works with tables as well. This is one other nice feature here. So VLOOKUP really happens, it is super useful, particularly in large data sets, if you don't want to be scrolling through manually on your own. So we can go ahead and use that here. So for instance, let's particularly, I'm going to enter an ID here. So maybe I want to look up a particular employee, and this employee has ID E850-316. But I don't really want to go to my chart and look through 500 data points. I'm going to use the VLOOKUP feature here. So I'm going to hit enter and hit start typing in VLOOKUP. And I'm going to select that there. And the value that I'm looking up here is the employee number. So I do want to look up this particular ID number. I'm going to hit a comma and then I'll type in my table name instead. So if I start typing in that table name, I can again look it up on the other worksheet in that table. I'm not limited to just this one worksheet that I'm on. So I'm telling it to, hey, look in this table particularly. Now, don't forget when you use VLOOKUP, you do have to tell it the column that you want to look up in. So if you go to that page, the column where the employee ID would be column 4. And then we do type in false here because we do want an exact match in this case. So I can go ahead and hit enter, and then I get that employee's name. And again, if you go back to your employee sheet, you would see that the 4th column so the 4th column, sorry, just pause there, is the full name column here, right? So if you look in the table 1, 2, 3, 4, so we're looking for the employee's full name. So we're using their employee ID. It's not this person, but we're using the employee ID, right? We're looking at the entire table to find the employee ID, and the output that I wanted was their full name. So that's why I use column 4. And then again, I used false because I do want the exact match in this case here. And that's what we were doing back here with that VLOOKUP. And you can continue as well. So if I want to find the department that this employee works in, instead of using the fourth column, let's see, I'm going to use the fifth column here instead, right? Because I'm looking at the department. But again, I'm selecting the entire table to look in. So that VLOOKUP still works in tables as well. And again, it doesn't have to even be on the same sheet. You can still use that formula and just make sure you select that you're looking at the entire table here. And that table has a name, so we can name that table and just quickly type it in as well.